recording should be started. Great. So before we launch into the sort of content of this evening about the climate cafes, just a little bit of an introduction to us. So we're the Highlands and Islands Climate Hub. We support community-led climate action across the Highland and Northern Isles. So we cover the Highland Council area, Orkney and Shetland. We have staff that are based across that area who can support any community groups with the design, development and delivery of any sustainability climate action projects. So if that's something that you're looking to set up a climate cafe in your area and you want a wee bit more support, then yeah, definitely give us a shout. We also provide seed funding, so it's just closed, but we run a climate action fund, which should be up and running in the summer again, as well as funding for events as part of our climate festival, which will take place in September 2024. And the third thing that we do is training, networking and peer-to-peer learning, which is obviously why we're running this event this evening. Yeah, so into the content of the session. So we'll be hearing from three speakers: Jess Pepper, who's the director of Climate Cafe; Isabel McLeish, who previously coordinated the really successful Climate Cafe in Inverness. And it's brilliant to see Jackie with us as well. She's the coordinator of Climate Cafe Dundee. And then, yeah, as I mentioned, we'll finish with a Q&A. So please do start thinking up your questions. Is everything clear? Does anyone have any questions? If not, then we'll get started and I'll hand over to Jess. Okay, cool. Let's go. Jess.
Thanks, Barry. Everybody happy? I can't see everybody, but I can see most hands. I think most icons or photos. So nice to see everybody and read all the comments and see the diversity of places that people are from. I'm really glad to join you all for this chatty, relaxed session, which is very much in the spirit of a climate cafe, an informal chat. Normally, it would be quite cool to just chat through as we go through the slides, but I think just for the purposes of our call, it's probably easier for me to go through some slides beforehand and then hopefully open up into a wider chat, as Barry's explained, and with the other fabulous coordinators who you've got here, which is really great. A little bit of background and introduction. My name is Jess Pepper. As you can see, our Climate Cafe began in 2015, a model from rural Perthshire, which started very organically as we realised that people really could value the space to talk about climate change. And at the time, it was a little bit taboo to talk about it. It's not the sort of conversation that people struck up at the bus stop or in the co-op or at the school gate. So creating the space to be able to grab a drink and chat and maybe be inspired to act as well was something which seemed appropriate for the moment. And we quickly learned was a space that people really valued in their own community. And in a really organic way, climate cafes have learned from each other and sprouted up in other communities as well. So you'll see there's a cluster across Perth and Kinross, which is normally about a dozen. And there are now clusters emerging in other parts of Scotland, but also across the UK and around the world now too. So it's been community to community sharing rather than training or anything else. This is a sharing of a model. When I talk about we, this is our experiences shared from across coordinators, across communities. And in 2021, we established the KIC, the Community Interest Company, that was able to host a website. It took a bit of thinking about how to create an organisation that could support and advise and share guidance, but not interfere in the community-led nature of a climate cafe, which is crucial, as you'll hear a bit more about. So I'll pop onto the slides if that's okay, please, Barry. Thank you. So it's a very simple model, Climate Cafe. Since starting in 2015, the name has been used in other circumstances, which is a wee bit more complicated, but the original model is very simply creating a space that everybody can feel welcome to drink, chat, and act on climate. And because the conversation and the action is community-led, it's not directed in any way. That comes from the community that knows what's happening in its own area and what people might like to be involved in, what the challenges and the opportunities are in that place. And that's the beauty of the cafe, that community leadership again. Thanks, Vary. Am I able to? Oh, there we go. Yeah, sorry. That's great. So there's a wee glimpse there of a slide. I don't know if you're able to go back to that one of thanks to Alistair, who's credited for that photo at Climate Cafe Dundee. You'll see there's just a few images from climate cafes where you can see that these are informal spaces. People can come and they can feel relaxed and they can chat with each other, network, meet other people, share ideas. The settings are very different in different communities. So in some places, more often than not, people want to gather in a circle and it's very informal. The format can be moved around by the people who are in that space. And often, folk want to have a chat in a way that everybody can contribute to the same conversations. But in other places, as is happening here in Dundee, people have smaller chats in the same space and get the chance to move around between conversations. Thanks, Vary. You'll keep hearing me saying community-led, and I know this is something that kicks around quite a lot, but we've really tried as the Climate Cafe KIC, which is really the hub for Climate Cafe, the growing Climate Cafe network, to ensure that that ethos of being community-led is really protected and valued, and we continue to learn. Every day is another day to learn how people are using the ideas of the model and being inspired and informed, and how communities are getting involved in climate chat and action. A community can be a community of place, a geographic community, but it could also be a community of interest. So in the run up to COP26 in Glasgow, there was a community chat for the media, Climate Cafe Media, for those in Scotland, that connected them up to hear other voices from around the world ahead of the negotiations in Glasgow. But it could also be a community in a workplace or a school or a campus as well. So the sense of community can be defined in different ways, but often it's a geographical place, and you'll be able to explore some of those on our website. Thanks, Vary. Here's just another image of a climate cafe. So you can see there's one climate cafe coordinator coming along to another climate cafe to connect up the conversations across Glasgow in this incident. Where this is hosted by Glasgow Kelvin College, and over the course of COP26, when they started climate cafes, there were climate cafes with particular themes, and that's also an option. Some people like to have themes. You'll see in Climate Cafe Aberdeen, for example, they have a theme for each of their cafes and maybe 2 or 3 speakers. Others tend to have maybe one speaker for a short prompt to conversation and then allow the conversation to roll from that. Or they may have a couple of speakers with different topics at a climate cafe. But others might use arts or a creative activity or a poem, and you'll hear more about some of the activities that climate cafes have employed from some of the other coordinators, I'm sure. But you can see that again here, the relaxed nature of the chat and the themes at Glasgow Kelvin. There was a climate cafe, there was a strong climate justice theme. During COP26, the climate cafes created a really inclusive space in order to hear from those voices that might not be heard at COP26 itself. And so created space to hear from those around the world, particularly on the front line, particularly from Global South and Indigenous peoples, younger voices, and the voices of women were some of those who were included. There's a climate justice cafe on the theme of disability, and another on the theme of gender as well, which was a hybrid, bringing in people from around the world, from Indonesia, the Philippines, India, to join the conversation with those who are based in Glasgow. And this is at the East End campus at Glasgow Kelvin College. So that was a really great opportunity to create that space for voices to be heard. Thanks, Vary. So very simply, there is an ethos that the climate cafes who are registered on the network agree to, that these are spaces that are welcoming, that they're informal, accessible spaces. So that might be thinking about providing tea and coffee for free, and cakes and biscuits if you're able. But it might also be thinking about the accessibility of the audio for those who might have difficulties hearing, or in terms of accessibility physically as well. So thinking about how everybody can access that space. So it's absolutely a space that everybody is welcome to and can get to happily and comfortably. An inclusive space for everyone. So there's a bit of thinking goes into that about the kind of language, just thinking about just this isn't a space which is exclusively for experts. In fact, quite the opposite. It's much more diverse across a community, can be intergenerational. And so the beauty of a climate cafe is the diversity of voices that you will hear and will feel able to contribute, hopefully. So the language is really important to think about as well. It should feel like a safe space, and that's up to the coordinator to ensure that that is a space that everybody feels welcome and safe in, and they're for everyone. You'll hear me stressing that everybody should feel welcome and comfortable and excited about going to their climate cafe. Some people have described them as fun. Some people, a word that comes up a lot is inspiring as well, which is really nice to hear. Often people feel that they're less isolated and more connected, feel excited by what change they can see happening in their own communities and across the network, but also gather that sense of agency that together we can actually do plenty, and it inspires lots of action. And that's what's really remarkable. Climate cafes can inspire an incredible amount of action, which is led by the communities and the individuals involved themselves. Thanks, Vary. This is another image, just a different kind of climate cafe. This is a pop-up. This one was at Strathclyde University, and you can see everybody's playing with Lego. There was no defined script as to what to do with the Lego. It's just that, well, hands were busy, people were chatting with each other. The woman who's talking at this one, obviously there were some masks still at that time, is an expert on COP governance and procedures and policies, and the Lego team facilitating other conversations at Strathclyde were having an interesting conversation about that as well. So you can see that's quite a small cafe, but you could have several tables doing exactly the same as we did at the Scottish Rural and Islands Parliament in Fort William, which some of you may have been at as well. This is a pop-up, so it's not necessarily a regular monthly cafe. And there's no hard and fast rules, but a lot of the Climate Cafe coordinators have chosen to go for monthly pop-ups, which tend to last for 90 minutes. But this one, Climate Cafes last for 90 minutes, but this one is a pop-up, so it's a one-off. And sometimes you can see others, for example, a climate cafe in a bus station over a couple of hours where people are able to drop by and chat about climate and just, in the course of their everyday life, which is a valued opportunity as well. Thanks, Vary. Every climate cafe will be unique to people in place. Of course, every setting is different. The people in the place will be different. And that, again, is the beauty of the conversation that will start there. You can actually find climate cafes popping up quite close to each other, or even in the same community. So in Aberfeldy, for example, there's a climate cafe at the high school, and there's also a climate cafe in the community. And sometimes they collaborate on projects, and sometimes other climate cafes then collaborate on things as well. So they are collaborating at the moment in that community and also with others across the region to do an event on fashion, which has been an idea that's come out of one of the climate cafe chats in the community. So they will be unique, and the way they connect with others will be unique, and that look and feel needs to be appropriate to the people who are there and who are involved. Another glimpse of how relaxed and happy a climate cafe can be. And again, another model. So you can see this one's a bit more hybrid, which is another approach. I mentioned that there was another 2 or 3, and this is bringing in people with different stories into the conversations at COP26, and people being able to contribute online as well, which is really nice. You'll see that in Aberdeen, and you can see that in some of the international cafes. For example, Climate Cafe Multi-Faith, which involves people from across different faiths as well. Yeah, thanks, Mary. I'll go onto the bullet points. If you just want to ping through them, that's fine. Thank you. So you'll see these slides are very simple because it is a simple model, and there's no need to overcomplicate it. It's an opportunity that's open to all. So there's space for lots of climate cafes to pop up. And as I said, they can pop up in quite close to each other. And some of them are in cities and some of them are in campuses and workplaces. And some are in very tiny villages where there's smaller groups. But what we have learned is that where the conversation might start in a climate cafe, it can connect wider in the community. Even if people aren't regularly attending the cafe itself, the conversation continues through the cafe, and it's a space that everybody should feel welcome to. So there's something really important in that it's not competing with anything else. It's just creating a space for everyone to learn about maybe what's going on in the area, or a piece of leadership that a business or a child or somebody else in the community is leading, or a project and their updates. So it should be very open and accessible to everybody, as I've said. We've learned quite quickly, and this continues, that climate cafes can be really great intergenerational spaces. And this was apparent from the very beginning, where children were involved in the creation of the first climate cafe. And one of the first involved has been involved since she was age 11 and is now on our board, and she's about to be 21. So she has a great deal of learning about how climate cafes can work to support children and younger people in their climate action, and also to lead and inform and work with others of other generations. And that became particularly apparent, the value of that, through Climate Strike, when children and young people were leading Climate Strike and were getting really positive support and solidarity in their own communities from older folk within the community, which was a really positive endorsement and support to go back to, which was really nice. There are also creative spaces. As I've said, lots of creative projects. So some people might kick off their climate cafe with decorating some mugs and getting everybody involved in that way. But there's all sorts of ideas now for creative ideas. You'll see that climate cafes quite often pop up alongside maybe cinemas or art centres, community centres doing artistic things as well. So there's a nice engagement there and lots of room for being creative too. Climate cafes are now part of this global network, which is lovely. And the global network get together for calls, what we call network calls. And we're trialing new models to share new ideas with the network coordinators. So, for example, we did a climate cafe for the global network on ecocide laws the other day, because there's an open consultation in the Scottish Parliament just now, and we wanted to involve people with that and also get international perspectives on what's happening in other countries as well. So that attracted 10 climate cafe coordinators, and then they were able to take that back to their own climate cafes for further discussion and to raise awareness about that issue. So we've got a couple of more scheduled and coming up in the next few months. And also we have network calls where people can get together with that same sense of community, the magic that happens in local cafes, to connect, advise, support, share ideas, and talk about potential challenges. For example, after the pandemic, coming back from Zoom to meeting in person or doing hybrid calls, the climate cafe coordinators were able to share their own ideas and experiences of how that was working for them. And essentially, the climate cafes are non-party political. Everything will be political with a small p, but they're not promoting any particular political party or any particular climate solution. These are spaces for discussing, but we can definitely signpost to apolitical material and information and science that has been robustly checked to be non-aligned as well. So that's something which we can help with at the Climate Cafe Hub. Thanks, Barry. Yes, something to mention quickly, and if people are interested, we can pick up on this again. But what we've learned is that climate cafes can be really valuable ways of initiating a really constructive dialogue with local government. And increasingly, we see the local government are keen to support climate cafes because it gives them an insight into what is happening in a local area and the diversity of voices and challenges and ideas from across a region. So in Perth and Kinross, quite early on, the coordinators were invited to meet regularly with local authority officials. And now Perth and Kinross Council actually have their own internal staff climate cafe as well, where they can share ideas and promote things. And they've just been out tree planting this week, but they're involved in all sorts of other discussions and activity as well, which keeps that diversity of chat going across the whole local authority staff, the 500 staff, rather than just in one policy area or one section of local government. But that can be a really nice synergy there to support engagement and communication across communities with local and wider government and public bodies. We've got some nice examples of that if people are interested in more. So if you would like to think about setting up a climate cafe, these are the ways that the hub can support you right now. You might notice that if you've been onto our website, that there are different pages featuring some of the different climate cafes. We're glad to say that after a long time of solely volunteer effort, we've got a bit of funding now to be able to bring a map and a wider directory and more pages to the website soon, so watch out for that. But on there, you'll be able to see some of the bespoke logos that you can get if you set up your own climate cafe. We're able to offer support and guidance. You'll get invites to Climate Cafe network calls for all the coordinators. Increasingly, you'll start to see signposts to more resources, but in the meantime, you can get in touch with us